On the outside, Marcus and Evelyn looked like the couple everyone else in their small Texas town wanted to be. Their two-story brick house sat on the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac, framed by a freshly painted white picket fence and a front yard where Evelyn's roses bloomed in thick, colorful clusters. Neighbors waved when Marcus mowed the lawn on Saturday mornings, and Evelyn's laughter often floated out from the kitchen window when she hosted church friends for coffee. To anyone peeking in, theirs was the portrait of a steady, faithful marriage. But portraits can be deceiving. Behind closed doors, their life had slowly begun to fray. Marcus, once a man quick with a smile, had grown distant. His work in construction management often kept him late or out of town, returning home drained and distracted. Evelyn, meanwhile, had spent more and more evenings alone. At 42, she still had the kind of soft beauty that turned heads, but her eyes carried a loneliness she kept hidden from the world. Neighbors never suspected the strain. On Sunday mornings, Marcus held Evelyn's hand in the church pew, bowing his head in prayer like a man who believed his world was firmly in God's grip. After service, family stopped them in the parking lot with the same remark, "You two are just perfect together." Marcus forced a polite smile. Evelyn lowered her gaze, the corners of her lips twitching upward in a practiced expression. Inside, both knew better. At night, their conversations were clipped, reduced to short exchanges about bills, schedules, or what was in the fridge. Marcus carried guilt over not being there more, but he didn't know how to fix it. Evelyn carried resentment for being left behind, yet she wasn't brave enough to say it out loud. The silence between them became a wall, and with every passing week, the wall grew taller. Still, they played their roles flawlessly. To the outside world, the Pattersons were steady as stone. Evelyn baked pies for the church fundraiser, and Marcus helped patch a neighbor's leaky roof without asking for payment. They were the dependable ones, the couple others pointed to when gossip about divorce or infidelity rattled through town. But even dependable things break under enough pressure. On one humid Thursday evening, a neighbor named Carol stopped by with a plate of cookies. She stood at the doorway, handing them to Evelyn, and said with a grin, "Marcus is lucky to have a woman like you. Y'all are the kind of couple that gives people hope." Evelyn smiled weakly, clutching the plate. Her eyes flicked past Carol's shoulder to the empty driveway. Marcus was away again. She swallowed hard and whispered, "Thank you, Carol. That's kind of you." When Carol left, Evelyn shut the door and leaned her forehead against it, breathing slowly, as though holding back tears. Marcus, miles away at a motel off Interstate 45, was staring at his dinner untouched. He had called earlier, telling her he'd be back late. In truth, he had sat in silence for an hour, staring at the bland wallpaper, wondering why coming home no longer felt like relief. He loved her, he knew he did, but something had shifted between them, something he couldn't name. That night, lying in separate places, they both felt the same hollowness. The cracks in their marriage were invisible to the casual eye, but painfully clear to those living inside it. For Marcus, it was the gnawing guilt of absence and the fear that he was losing the woman he had promised to cherish. For Evelyn, it was the ache of neglect, the quiet yearning for connection, for touch, for someone to see her again. Neither of them could have known how those cracks would soon explode into something unthinkable. Sometimes, the perfect picture doesn't fade quietly. Sometimes, it shatters. The storm that had been quietly brewing finally broke on a Friday evening in late September. Marcus had finished a job site earlier than expected. Instead of checking into another roadside motel, he decided to surprise his wife. He drove the 2 hours back to their suburban neighborhood in near silence. The radio turned low, headlights cutting through the dusky Texas sky. He thought about Evelyn, about how her face might light up when she saw him at the door unexpectedly. Maybe tonight, he told himself, things would start to mend. Maybe love could still feel simple again. By the time he pulled into the driveway, night had already fallen. Their front porch light glowed warmly against the darkness. Marcus stepped out of his truck, stretched, and grabbed his overnight bag. From the street, their house looked peaceful, ordinary, the kind of home where nothing catastrophic could ever happen. But when he opened the front door, that illusion vanished. The living room smelled faintly of wine and perfume. A low hum of music came from the stereo, something soft and sultry. Marcus froze just inside the doorway, his heartbeat suddenly thundering in his chest. Then he heard it, laughter. Evelyn's laughter. But it wasn't the light, melodic sound he remembered from the early years of their marriage. This was huskier, edged with something he couldn't quite place. He stepped further into the hallway, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor. The voices grew clearer. A man's voice joined hers, low and intimate. And then Marcus saw them. Evelyn was on the couch, her body turned toward a man he had never seen before. She was flushed, her blouse slightly undone, and his hand was between her legs. For a moment, the world stopped moving. Marcus's breath caught like glass in his throat. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. Evelyn's head snapped toward him, her face draining of color. Her lips parted, a gasp escaping as though the air itself had betrayed her. The man jerked back, pulling his hand away in shock. "Marcus," Evelyn stammered, scrambling to fix her blouse. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, his fists clenched at his sides, the overnight bag sliding from his hand to the floor with a dull thud. He felt heat rising in his chest, his vision narrowing until all he could see was his wife and the stranger beside her. What the hell is this?" His voice cracked, raw with disbelief. "Wait," she pleaded, tears already gathering in her eyes. "It's not what you think. Not what I think." He laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and humorless. "You're sitting here with another man's hand all over you, Evelyn. Tell me what the hell I'm supposed to think." The stranger stood awkwardly, fumbling to gather his jacket. "I should go," he muttered, avoiding Marcus's glare. Without another word, he slipped past Marcus and hurried out the door, leaving the heavy silence of betrayal behind. Evelyn stepped forward, trembling. "Marcus, please, listen to me." But Marcus couldn't. His ears rang, his chest heaved. He shook his head, staring at her as if she were a stranger. "I gave you everything. I worked my back into the ground for this house, for us. And this is what you do? This is how you love me." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was lonely. You're never here, Marcus. You don't look at me anymore. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Please, stop." His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Don't you dare blame this on me." She reached for him, but he stepped back. The space between them felt like a canyon, impossible to cross. For a long, excruciating moment, they just stared at each other, her, desperate and broken, him, shattered and seething. Then, without another word, Marcus turned, grabbed his bag, and walked out the door. The cool night air hit him like a slap, but it didn't clear the chaos in his head. He stumbled to his truck, started the engine, and drove. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stay. Inside the house, Evelyn sank to the floor, sobbing into her hands. Marcus drove for hours that night, the road unspooling endlessly beneath his tires. The image of Evelyn on the couch replayed over and over, each time sharper, more brutal. He had imagined betrayal before. Every husband in America knows the flicker of that fear, but he had never believed it could happen to him. Not like this. Not so brazen, so humiliating. When he finally pulled into a motel parking lot just before dawn, his hands were still shaking. He sat in the cab, staring at the steering wheel, his mind a storm. He wanted to scream, to smash something, to erase what he had seen. But nothing could change it. Nothing could undo the sight of his wife letting another man touch her. That night was the moment the perfect picture of their marriage shattered into pieces. And once broken, there would be no way to put it back together again. Evelyn sat alone in the silence after Marcus stormed out, her sobs echoing in the living room. The man, Daniel, had already fled, leaving behind only the faint scent of cologne and the crushing weight of her mistake. She pressed her palms against her face, her body trembling. Daniel wasn't a lover in the way people might imagine. He was a co-worker from the floral shop, someone who had stopped by a few times to help her carry boxes, someone who lingered when Marcus was gone on business. Evelyn had never planned for it to go so far. A glass of wine had loosened her tongue that night, and Daniel's sympathetic ear had turned into a dangerous hand. The moment Marcus caught them, Evelyn realized the enormity of what she had risked, not just her marriage, but the very foundation of her life. Daniel texted her later that night. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Please don't tell your husband my name." She deleted the message immediately, her heart racing. Whatever weakness had drawn her into that moment of betrayal, she knew it was over. Daniel wasn't the man she wanted. He never had been. He was only the mirror of her loneliness. But Marcus wouldn't see it that way. Evelyn spent the rest of that night pacing the house, replaying the look on her husband's face. The hurt, the disbelief, it was worse than any anger he could have shown. She would have preferred him yelling, breaking things, even leaving for good. Instead, he had looked at her as though she had died in front of him. By dawn, she wrote him a message she never sent. "Marcus, I need you to know it was nothing. You are everything. Please don't let this destroy us." The words sat unsent in her phone, mocking her with their inadequacy. The following day at work, she moved like a ghost through the aisles of flowers. Her coworker, noticing her red eyes, asked if she was all right. Evelyn forced a smile. "Didn't sleep well," she lied. Every bouquet she arranged reminded her of Marcus's hands. Hands that had built their home, carried her across the threshold on their wedding day, touched her with tenderness for years. How could she have thrown it all away for a fleeting moment of weakness? That evening, she tried again to reach him. Call after call, voicemail after voicemail. "Marcus, please. I was stupid. I was lonely. But I love you. I've always loved you." Each unanswered ring deepened her fear. And yet, beneath her remorse, a flicker of dread began to grow. She knew Marcus's pride, his stubbornness, the way he carried hurt like stone in his chest. She knew betrayal would wound him deeper than most men. Still, she clung to hope. She believed if he just listened, if he could see her tears, he would remember their love. She told herself that their marriage was stronger than one mistake. She convinced herself Marcus would forgive her if she begged hard enough. What Evelyn didn't know, what she could not know, was that Marcus's silence wasn't the silence of forgiveness forming. It was the silence of rage fermenting, hardening into something she would never be able to break through. By the time the second night came, Evelyn convinced herself she could still fix it. She rehearsed her apology in the car as she drove home, whispering the words like a prayer. She imagined Marcus finally softening, pulling her into his arms, letting the past dissolve into memory. But in the shadows of the kitchen, waiting with hollow eyes and trembling hands, Marcus Patterson was no longer the man she had married. And Evelyn was walking into a storm far greater than the one she thought she could calm. Marcus didn't sleep that night, not even for a moment. He lay on the stiff motel mattress, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling fan turning lazily above him. Every time he closed his eyes, the image of Evelyn on the couch returned with cruel precision. The tilt of her head, the stranger's hand on her body, the panic in her eyes when she realized she had been caught. The sound of her voice, trembling with excuses, haunted him like a broken record. By dawn, his chest ached as though a steel weight had been strapped to it. He sat up, ran his hands through his hair, and muttered, "God, why? Why her? Why me?" The first day blurred into fragments. He drove aimlessly, wandering highways, stopping at diners but barely touching his food. Waitresses asked if he was okay. He nodded, forced a smile, and left a few dollars on the counter, but he didn't taste a bite. He was starving, yet every swallow felt like gravel in his throat. His phone buzzed constantly. Evelyn's name lit the screen again and again. Sometimes she called. Sometimes she sent long text messages. "Marcus, please. I need to explain. It was a mistake, I swear. Don't shut me out. Talk to me." Each time, Marcus stared at the glowing screen, his thumb hovering, then turned the phone face down. He couldn't bring himself to answer. He couldn't bear to hear her voice. Not yet. By nightfall, he bought a bottle of whiskey at a liquor store off the interstate. He sat in the motel parking lot, unscrewed the cap, and drank straight from the neck. The burn down his throat was fierce, but it dulled the edges of his thoughts. For a little while, he stopped replaying the scene in his mind. For a little while, he almost felt numb. But the numbness never lasted. He woke the next morning with his head pounding and his stomach churning. Empty bottles littered the floor. The sunlight stabbing through the blinds made him wince. He staggered to the bathroom, splashed water on his face, and looked at his reflection. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with exhaustion. The man staring back at him looked older than his years, a stranger hollowed out by grief. He whispered to the mirror, "You're a fool. 10 years, and you didn't see it. You didn't see her slipping away." That second day was worse than the first. He tried to busy himself, turned on the TV, flipped through channels, watched half a football game, but nothing held his attention. Every sound seemed to mock him. Every commercial with a smiling couple cut like a blade. When he stepped outside, neighbors at the motel gave him cautious glances. They saw a man unraveling, a man who kept to himself and muttered under his breath. Marcus didn't care. He felt like a ghost already. In the quiet moments, his anger flared hottest. He pictured the man he had seen with Evelyn, some faceless intruder who had dared to touch what was his. Rage twisted through him like barbed wire. He slammed his fists into the steering wheel of his truck until his knuckles bled. And then guilt followed, crawling in right behind the anger. He thought of their wedding day, Evelyn's smile under the Texas sun, her vows trembling with emotion as she promised to stand by him. He thought of the years they had shared, road trips, Christmas mornings, lazy Sundays. Had it all been a lie? Or had she simply grown tired of waiting for him to come home? By that evening, the war inside him had reached a fever pitch. He drank again, slumped in the corner of the motel room, and spoke out loud to the empty walls. She killed us. She destroyed everything. But maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I failed her first. The phone buzzed once more, and this time he picked it up. A voicemail played, Evelyn's voice, thick with tears. Marcus, please, I can't lose you. I know I messed up, but I love you. Please come home. Please talk to me. He sat frozen long after the message ended, the silence pressing down like a weight. His throat tightened, and for the first time in years, Marcus wept openly, shoulders shaking, tears burning down his cheeks. But grief twisted into fury again just as quickly. In his mind, Evelyn wasn't just his wife anymore. She was the woman who had humiliated him, the woman who had allowed another man into the space that was supposed to be sacred. 2 days. That was all it took to turn Marcus from a broken-hearted husband into something darker. 2 days of sleepless nights, unanswered questions, and festering rage. By the time the second night fell, Marcus wasn't just hurt. He wasn't just betrayed. He was consumed. And when Evelyn finally came home that evening, walking into the kitchen where the air was thick with silence, she had no idea the man waiting for her was no longer the husband she thought she knew. He was something else now, something dangerous. The second night carried a heavy stillness, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Evelyn's car pulled into the driveway just past 9. The tires crunched over the gravel, headlights sweeping across the darkened windows of the house. Inside, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, a half-empty glass of whiskey in front of him. He hadn't bothered to turn on the lights. Only the dim glow from the stove clock illuminated his face, throwing shadows across his hollow eyes. The sound of keys jingling at the front door echoed through the house. The door creaked open. Evelyn stepped inside, setting her purse down with a weary sigh. She called out softly, almost uncertain. Marcus. Her voice trembled. She hadn't heard from him in 2 days. Each call, each message had gone unanswered. She prayed that tonight would be different, that maybe they could talk, maybe they could salvage something from the wreckage. In here, Marcus answered, his voice flat, low. Evelyn followed the sound to the kitchen. When she saw him sitting there in the shadows, her breath caught. He looked worn down, his hair disheveled, his knuckles bruised. But it was his eyes that unsettled her most. They were empty, like a man already gone. She approached cautiously, her heels clicking on the tile. Marcus, she whispered, tears already brimming. Thank God. I was so afraid you wouldn't. He cut her off, his tone sharp. Did you think I'd forget? The silence stretched between them like a blade. Evelyn clasped her hands together, fighting for composure. Please, listen to me. That night, it was a mistake. I was lonely, Marcus. You're gone so much, and I. Marcus's fist slammed against the table, rattling the glass. Don't you dare blame this on me. She flinched, tears spilling over. I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming myself. I was weak. I was foolish. But it didn't mean anything, I swear it. He rose slowly from his chair, his towering frame casting a long shadow across the kitchen floor. His voice cracked with anguish. Didn't mean anything? Evelyn, I see it every time I close my eyes. Him touching you. You letting him. Do you have any idea what that does to a man? She stepped closer, desperate. Marcus, please. I love you. I never stopped loving you. He laughed bitterly, a hollow, broken sound. Love? Was that love on that couch? Evelyn's knees buckled, and she dropped to the floor, sobbing. I'll do anything, therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Don't throw us away. Don't throw me away. Marcus stood frozen, his chest heaving. For a fleeting second, he saw the woman he had married, the woman in a white dress under the Texas sun, smiling as if he were her whole world. His throat tightened, and his eyes burned with tears. But then the other image slammed back into him. Evelyn's flushed face, another man's hand where only his should have been. The rage swallowed him whole. Evelyn crawled toward him, reaching for his hand. "Please, Marcus," she whispered. "Forgive me. I need you." Something inside him snapped. His hands moved before his mind could catch up. He gripped her shoulders, then her neck, his fingers trembling as they closed around her throat. Evelyn gasped, clawing at his arms, her eyes wide with terror. "Marcus," she choked out, her voice strangled. "Don't, please." He squeezed tighter, tears streaming down his own face. "You killed me first, Evelyn," he growled, his voice breaking. "You killed everything we were." She struggled, her nails digging into his skin, but his fury was stronger than her desperation. The kitchen filled with the sound of her muffled cries, the scrape of her heels against the tile. For a moment, Marcus saw flashes, memories of her laughter, their road trips, her head resting on his shoulder during late-night movies. They collided with the image of betrayal, twisting into a blur of love and hate. And then, suddenly, there was silence. Evelyn's body went limp in his arms, her eyes staring blankly into nothing. Marcus froze, still holding her, his chest pounding as though it might burst. Reality crashed over him like a wave. He released her, and she crumpled to the floor, lifeless. Marcus staggered back, horrified at his own hands, his own strength. He pressed himself against the counter, trembling violently. "No. God, no," he whispered. "What have I done?" He sank to his knees beside her, sobbing uncontrollably. He touched her face gently, as if his tenderness could undo the violence, as if love could breathe life back into her. But the room was silent, save for his broken cries. The roses Evelyn had arranged on the kitchen table earlier that week sat in a vase nearby, their petals beginning to wilt. The sight of them gutted Marcus. What once symbolized beauty and love now mocked him, reminders of what he had destroyed with his own hands. Hours passed before he moved again. He sat slumped against the cabinets, Evelyn's body lying just feet away, the weight of his actions pressing down like chains. Outside, the world carried on. Cars passed, neighbors slept, the moon drifted across the Texas sky. But inside that kitchen, time had stopped. Marcus was no longer the man his neighbors admired, no longer the husband in the church pew holding his wife's hand. He was something else now, a man consumed by betrayal, undone by rage, defined forever by a single irreversible act. And deep down, he knew the world would never see him the same again. Morning crept into the Patterson house like an unwelcome guest. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting thin stripes across the kitchen floor where Evelyn's body still lay. Her skin was pale now, lips parted slightly, the stillness around her suffocating. Marcus hadn't moved from his place against the cabinets. His eyes were swollen from crying, his hands raw from clenching and unclenching through the night. The clock on the wall ticked with agonizing indifference. Every second seemed to taunt him. He whispered to the silence, his voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted her to understand." But the silence gave no answer. By mid-morning, the neighborhood began to stir. Lawnmowers buzzed in distant yards, children laughed on bicycles, dogs barked at passing cars. The world outside was alive, blissfully unaware of the horror sealed inside the Patterson kitchen. It was Evelyn's absence that first drew attention. She hadn't shown up for her morning shift at the floral shop downtown. Evelyn was never late, never careless with her commitments. When she didn't answer her phone, her coworker called the house. No response. Concern mounted quickly. By noon, their next-door neighbor, Mrs. Hopkins, decided to check in. She walked up the driveway, balancing a casserole dish, planning to knock and gently inquire. She tapped on the door once. Twice. No sound. Frowning, she tried the knob. It was unlocked. "Evelyn," she called softly, stepping inside. The air felt heavy, unnatural. As she moved toward the kitchen, the smell hit her first. Sharp, metallic, unmistakable. Her eyes widened. And then she saw them. Marcus sat slumped against the cabinets, motionless, his eyes glassy and unfocused. Evelyn lay sprawled on the tile, her lifeless form frozen in the morning light. Mrs. Hopkins screamed, the casserole crashing to the floor. Within minutes, sirens pierced the quiet neighborhood. Red and blue lights flashed against the Pattersons' brick walls. Curious neighbors gathered on sidewalks, whispering in disbelief. The perfect couple everyone had admired was suddenly the center of a nightmare. Detective Raymond Carter was among the first to step inside. A seasoned officer with 2 decades on the force, he had seen his share of domestic tragedies. Still, the sight before him made his stomach twist. He crouched near Evelyn's body, examining her neck, the bruising already stark against her skin. He glanced at Marcus, who barely seemed to register the intrusion. His voice was low, almost detached. She betrayed me, and I couldn't stop seeing it. I couldn't stop. Carter's jaw tightened. He had heard variations of that line before, excuses wrapped in grief and rage. He rose to his feet and signaled to the officers. Cuff him. The cold steel clicked around Marcus's wrists. He didn't resist, didn't speak. As they pulled him to his feet, his gaze lingered on Evelyn. For a moment, the mask of shock broke and anguish poured out. I loved you, he whispered, his voice cracking. God help me, I loved you. The officers led him past the front door, down the steps where neighbors stood in stunned silence. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Was that Marcus? Is Evelyn? No, it can't be. Mrs. Hopkins, still trembling, clutched her chest. Tears ran down her cheeks. I never thought. Not Marcus. Not them. In the back of the squad car, Marcus sat with his head bowed, wrists chained, watching the house grow smaller through the window. Memories flooded him. Barbecues on that porch, Christmas mornings by the fireplace, Evelyn's laughter echoing through the halls. The life they had built together was gone now, reduced to crime scene photos and whispered gossip. Back inside, crime scene technicians moved with grim efficiency. Cameras flashed, evidence bags filled, and the once warm kitchen transformed into a sterile stage for tragedy. Evelyn's roses still sat on the table, wilting quietly in their vase, as if mourning her too. Detective Carter stood in the doorway, shaking his head. He had seen love curdle into violence before, but it never got easier. Jealousy, he muttered under his breath, kills more than just marriages. Outside, as the body bag was wheeled out under a blanket of flashing lights, the town that had once envied the Pattersons now stared in silence. The perfect picture was gone, replaced by a portrait of betrayal, rage, and irreversible loss. And Marcus Patterson, the man who once embodied loyalty and strength, was on his way to a holding cell, carrying with him the unbearable weight of 2 words that would haunt him forever. Too late. News of Evelyn Patterson's death spread through the town like wildfire. By evening, the Patterson house was no longer just a quiet brick home on Willow Lane. It was a landmark of tragedy. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalks, their voices hushed, their eyes wide with disbelief. I just saw them at church last week, one woman whispered, clutching her Bible to her chest. They looked fine. How could this happen? Others shook their heads, unwilling to accept that the man they had admired, the one who had fixed roofs and mowed lawns, could have strangled his own wife. Yet the flashing police lights and the yellow tape around the Patterson home left no room for denial. At the floral shop downtown, Evelyn's co-workers received the news in tears. One young clerk dropped the bouquet she was arranging, petals scattering across the floor like fallen confetti. The shop manager closed early, taping a handwritten note on the door, closed in memory of Evelyn Patterson. Our hearts are broken. For Evelyn's family, the news was a blow that shattered them to the core. Her sister Rachel rushed to the police station, her face streaked with tears. She demanded answers, her voice shaking with both grief and fury. How could he do this? She screamed at an officer. How could Marcus, of all people, do this to her? Their mother, Margaret, refused to believe it at first. She sat in her living room with Evelyn's photograph clutched tightly against her chest, rocking back and forth in silence. When the official call finally came, confirming what the neighbors had already whispered, her cry filled the room like a wound torn open. The church community organized a candlelight vigil outside the Patterson home the following night. Dozens gathered, holding flickering candles, their faces pale in the glow. Pastor John, who had once praised Marcus and Evelyn as role models for marriage, stood trembling at the pulpit hastily set up on the lawn. We do not always see the storms brewing behind closed doors, he told the mourners, his voice heavy with sorrow. Evelyn was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She deserved love and life. Her death is not only a tragedy, it is a warning. Rachel stood at the front, her candle shaking in her hand. She whispered through her tears, "She didn't deserve this. Not like this." Reporters captured the vigil on camera, their broadcasts turning the small-town heartbreak into a headline for the entire state. Beloved wife and floor slain, husband charged in shocking murder. The story of Marcus and Evelyn Patterson became more than gossip. It became a cautionary tale, dissected by commentators and strangers alike. Some neighbors sympathized with Marcus, muttering that betrayal can break even the strongest man. Others condemned him outright, insisting nothing Evelyn had done justified her death. The town split down the middle, divided between pity and outrage. But for Evelyn's family, there was no debate, only loss. They began making funeral arrangements, choosing a simple casket lined with white roses, her favorite flower. Rachel visited the shop one last time, plucking the freshest blooms she could find, whispering to herself, "These are for you, Evie. You always said roses were proof that beauty could survive even the sharpest thorns." As the vigil ended, the candles extinguished one by one. The crowd dispersed into the night. The Patterson house loomed in silence, its windows dark, its roses wilting in the garden. It no longer stood as a symbol of love or stability. It was now a monument of betrayal, rage, and irreparable loss. And while Marcus sat in a cold holding cell downtown, his community, his neighbors, and Evelyn's grieving family prepared to face the weeks of legal battles and unanswered questions that lay ahead. The holding cell smelled of sweat, stale coffee, and old concrete. Marcus sat hunched over the metal bench, his wrists raw from the cuffs. Hours had passed since the sirens carried him away from the house, yet his mind hadn't left the kitchen. Evelyn's face still hovered before him, first alive and pleading, then still and lifeless. At last, the heavy door opened. Detective Raymond Carter stepped inside, a man who had built his career on reading broken people. His salt and pepper hair was cropped close, his tie slightly loosened. He carried no notebook, no file, just a styrofoam cup of coffee in one hand. He pulled out the chair across from Marcus and sat down slowly, as though he had all the time in the world. For a long stretch, neither man spoke. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence. Carter studied Marcus, noting the twitch in his jaw, the hollow look in his eyes. Finally, Carter leaned forward and set the coffee down. "You want to tell me what happened last night?" Marcus didn't answer. He stared at the scratched tabletop, his fingers interlocked so tightly the knuckles whitened. Carter's voice softened, almost fatherly. "You've been sitting here for hours, Marcus. Talking might help." At last, Marcus exhaled, the sound ragged. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," Carter replied. Marcus's eyes lifted, glistening. "I came home early. Thought I'd surprise her. Thought maybe we could start over." His voice cracked. "But she was there, with him." "Who was he?" Carter asked. Marcus shook his head. "I don't know. Doesn't matter. What matters is what I saw. His hands on her, and she let him." Carter leaned back, nodding slowly. "That had to hurt." "Hurt?" Marcus barked out a bitter laugh. "It tore me apart. I gave her everything I had. I worked myself to the bone. And she opened the door to someone else." He rubbed his temples, his shoulders slumping. "I left that night. Drove until I didn't know where I was. But I couldn't stop seeing it. Every time I closed my eyes, it was there. Her face, his hands." His voice dropped to a whisper. "It felt like I was dying." Carter watched him carefully, letting the silence stretch. "You had 2 days, Marcus. 48 hours. You could have left her. You could have filed for divorce. You could have walked away." Marcus's eyes burned. "I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But every time she called, every voicemail, I heard her crying, begging. I thought about how much I loved her. And then I thought about what she'd done. The two things couldn't live inside me together. It was tearing me apart." "So you confronted her," Carter said. Marcus nodded, his lips trembling. "She came home. I tried to listen, I swear I did. She said she was lonely. She said it meant nothing. But I looked at her, and all I saw was betrayal. I wanted to forgive her. I wanted to believe. But then she touched me, and I felt." He slammed his fist against the table. "I felt like a fool." His voice broke completely. "I lost control. I didn't plan it. I didn't wake up that morning thinking I'd kill my wife. But when my hands were around her throat, I couldn't stop. I was crying while I did it, detective. Crying." The confession hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. Carter let the words sink in. He had heard confessions like this before, men undone by pride, by jealousy, by rage disguised as love. But hearing it never got easier. "You understand what you're telling me," Carter said quietly. Marcus nodded, tears streaming freely now. "That I killed the only woman I ever loved." "No," Carter corrected, his tone firm. "That you chose not to walk away. You chose violence. And now she's gone." Marcus lowered his head into his hands. His sobs echoed against the concrete walls, raw and jagged. Carter stood, collecting the untouched coffee. He walked to the door, pausing before he left. "You think betrayal killed you, Marcus. But it didn't. You did this. And now you'll live with it for the rest of your life." The door clanged shut, leaving Marcus alone once more, drowning in the echo of his own confession. By the time the trial of State of Texas versus Marcus Patterson began, the story had already spread beyond the small town. Local news vans lined the courthouse steps. Reporters with notepads and cameras swarmed the entrance, eager to capture every detail of what neighbors had once called a perfect marriage turned nightmare. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The pew-like benches were packed, neighbors, co-workers, even strangers drawn by morbid curiosity. Evelyn's family sat in the front row, their grief raw and visible. Her sister clutched a tissue in both hands, twisting it until it tore. Her mother, a frail woman with silver hair, kept her eyes fixed on the empty witness stand, refusing to look at Marcus. Marcus entered flanked by deputies, his wrists shackled until he sat at the defense table. He wore a plain suit borrowed from a public defender's office closet, his tie crooked, his face gaunt. He didn't glance at the crowd. He couldn't. Judge Rebecca Harlow presided, a stern woman known for her no-nonsense rulings. Her gavel struck once, silencing the whispers. Court is now in session. The prosecution wasted no time painting Marcus as a cold-blooded killer. Assistant District Attorney Paul Ramsey, a man with a commanding voice and sharp features, rose from his chair and addressed the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about choices. Marcus Patterson had 48 hours, 2 full days, between discovering his wife's infidelity and the moment he took her life. 2 days to walk away. 2 days to cool down. 2 days to do anything but kill. But instead, he made a calculated decision to end Evelyn's life. That is murder, and that is why we are here." His words cut through the room like a knife. The jury, 7 women, 5 men, watched him closely, nodding slightly as he spoke. When it was the defense's turn, Attorney Claire Jennings stood. She was younger, less experienced, but her voice carried conviction. She adjusted her glasses and looked at the jurors with open sincerity. "This case is not about a calculated killer. It's about a man who was broken. A man who walked in on his wife betraying him in the most intimate way imaginable. He spiraled. He drank. He suffered. And when Evelyn begged him for forgiveness, his emotions overcame his reason. This was not premeditation. This was a crime of passion. Tragic, yes, but not cold-blooded murder." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Evelyn's sister shook her head violently, whispering to her mother, "He's lying. He knew what he was doing." The trial moved forward with a parade of witnesses. First was Mrs. Hopkins, the neighbor who had discovered the scene. She took the stand, her hands trembling as she recounted the moment she stepped into the kitchen. I saw Evelyn on the floor, and Marcus just sitting there, like he'd given up on life itself." Tears welled in her eyes. It didn't seem real. They were the couple everyone admired. The prosecution pressed her. "Did Marcus say anything in your presence?" She nodded. He whispered, "She betrayed me. I couldn't stop seeing it." Gasps echoed in the gallery. Marcus lowered his head, shame burning through him. Next came Detective Carter. Calm, professional, he testified about Marcus's confession in the interrogation room. He admitted placing his hands around her throat. He admitted he couldn't stop. "He cried while telling me, but the facts remain, he chose to kill her." On cross-examination, the defense asked, "Detective, did Mr. Patterson show remorse?" Carter hesitated. "Yes, but remorse after the fact doesn't erase the crime." Then Evelyn's mother took the stand. The gallery fell silent as she shuffled to the chair, her frame small, but her grief immense. Her voice quavered as she spoke. "My daughter was not perfect, but she was kind. She loved flowers. She loved people. She loved life. Marcus took that from her. He took my baby from me." Her words cracked the air like thunder. Some jurors wiped their eyes. Marcus himself bit down hard, tears slipping free despite his effort to remain composed. Finally, Marcus was called to testify. His lawyer urged against it, but he insisted. He wanted to speak. He walked to the stand, shoulders heavy, and swore the oath. When he sat, he looked directly at the jurors, his voice low, raw. I never wanted to hurt Evelyn. Not once in our marriage. When I saw her that night, it broke me. I thought I could forgive her. I thought maybe time would help. But it ate me alive. I drank. I cried. I begged God for peace. And when she came home, I lost myself. I snapped. I wasn't in control anymore. He paused, choking back emotion. I know what I did. I know she's gone because of me. And I will carry that weight until the day I die. But I swear to you, I didn't plan it. I didn't wake up that morning thinking I'd kill my wife. I just wanted the pain to stop. The courtroom was still, every ear straining to catch his words. Prosecutor Ramsey rose for cross-examination. He paced slowly, his voice measured but firm. Mr. Patterson, you admit you had 48 hours after seeing your wife with another man? Yes. You admit you had time to think? Time to calm down. Marcus's voice cracked. I tried. But you didn't walk away, Ramsey pressed, his voice rising. You didn't pack a bag and leave. You didn't file for divorce. You chose violence. You chose to put your hands around her throat and squeeze until she was gone. Isn't that true? The words slammed into Marcus like blows. He closed his eyes, tears streaking down his cheeks. Yes, he whispered. Ramsey turned to the jury, his voice booming. That, ladies and gentlemen, is murder. Not passion, not accident. Murder. Judge Harlow called for recess, her gavel striking as murmurs filled the room. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, and Evelyn's family embraced one another through sobs. As deputies led Marcus back to his holding cell, he caught one last glimpse of the gallery. Evelyn's mother stared at him, her eyes like steel. Not hatred, not pity, just the cold weight of truth. And Marcus knew, even before the jury reached a verdict, that his fate was sealed. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The foreman, a middle-aged woman with steady eyes, stood as Judge Harlow asked the question that would seal Marcus Patterson's fate. Have you reached a verdict? Yes, Your Honor. The words hung heavy. Papers rustled. People shifted in their seats, but the silence was absolute as the verdict was read aloud. We, the jury, find the defendant, Marcus Patterson, guilty of murder in the first degree. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Evelyn's sister sobbed into her mother's shoulder. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicking. Marcus closed his eyes, his head bowing as though the weight of the word guilty had finally crushed him. Judge Harlow's gavel struck once. Order in the court. The sentencing followed swiftly. The prosecution demanded the maximum penalty, citing the cold fact that Marcus had 2 full days to walk away and chose violence instead. The defense pleaded for mercy, arguing that Marcus was no predator, but a broken man consumed by betrayal. When Judge Harlow spoke, her voice carried the gravity of both justice and sorrow. Mr. Patterson, this court recognizes the deep emotions involved in this case. Infidelity wounds, betrayal scars, but none of it excuses what you did. You had choices. You had time. And you chose to take a life. She paused, her eyes steady on him. This court sentences you to life in prison, without the possibility of parole for 30 years. Gasps and murmurs filled the room again, but the judge's gavel silenced them. Evelyn's family wept openly, clinging to one another. For them, justice did not erase the hole Evelyn's absence left, but it was something, a recognition of the life stolen. Marcus sat motionless at the defense table, his lawyer whispering beside him, but the words never registered. His mind reeled back to that night in the kitchen, to Evelyn's desperate voice pleading, "Please, Marcus, forgive me." He would hear it forever, locked inside the prison of his memory long after the cell doors closed behind him. Deputies moved in, shackling his wrists once more. As they led him past the gallery, Marcus dared to lift his eyes. Evelyn's mother sat upright, her face streaked with tears, her gaze piercing through him. There was no forgiveness there, only a quiet, immovable grief. Reporters rushed out to file their stories. Headlines would splash across the evening news. Perfect marriage ends in murder. Husband sentenced to life for killing wife in fit of jealousy. Outside, neighbors shook their heads in disbelief. Some muttered about how they'd never imagined Marcus capable of such violence. Others whispered that maybe they should have seen the cracks sooner. In the town square, people gathered to talk, to argue, to mourn. But inside the courthouse, where the echo of the gavel still lingered, Marcus Patterson was led down a narrow hallway toward a future defined by bars, cold concrete, and regret. He glanced back only once, catching a final glimpse of the empty courtroom, the place where his love story had been dissected, judged, and condemned. For Marcus, the sentence was more than years in prison. It was the knowledge that he had destroyed the one person he had once promised to cherish, and in doing so, had destroyed himself. As the heavy doors shut behind him, the perfect picture was gone forever, replaced by the grim reality of a man who would spend the rest of his days haunted by the truth. Jealousy had not only killed Evelyn, it had devoured him whole. Prison swallowed Marcus Patterson whole. The clang of iron doors, the echo of boots on concrete, the endless roll call of names. This became his new world. Gone were the Saturday mornings with a lawn mower humming in the sun. Gone were the church pews where he once held Evelyn's hand. Instead, his days blurred into routines. Meals on metal trays, restless nights on a thin mattress, and long hours staring at walls that never answered back. But nothing was heavier than the silence. At night, when the prison lights dimmed, Marcus heard her voice. Evelyn's pleas echoed in his mind. "Please, Marcus, forgive me." Sometimes he whispered back, begging for forgiveness she could never give. Other times he sat in darkness, fists clenched, wishing he could forget, but knowing he never would. The town he left behind carried scars of its own. Neighbors who once envied the Pattersons' picture-perfect marriage now lowered their voices whenever they passed the old house on Willow Lane. The rose bushes Evelyn had tended with such care wilted, untended, a haunting reminder of what had been lost. Children whispered stories when they biked past. That's where it happened. Parents pulled them away, but even they couldn't shake the shiver. Evelyn's family struggled to pick up the pieces. Her sister closed the floral shop Evelyn had loved, unable to walk through the doors without breaking down. Her mother rarely left the house, clutching framed photos as though they might keep her daughter near. For them, the trial had brought justice, but justice was no substitute for Evelyn's smile at Sunday dinner or her laughter on Christmas morning. Reporters eventually moved on to other stories, but for those who knew them, the case never faded. At church, sermons turned to the dangers of letting anger fester. Local newspapers revisited the tragedy in quiet anniversary pieces, each one reminding the town how jealousy and silence had turned deadly. And Marcus, he carried his sentence not just in years, but in memory. In the prison yard, he walked alone. He didn't join the cliques, didn't speak unless spoken to. Other inmates called him pastor because of his quiet demeanor and the way he sometimes sat with a Bible open on his lap. But Marcus knew better. He wasn't searching for salvation. He was searching for Evelyn, in words, in dreams, in the fragments of a life he destroyed. 30 years stretched before him, but time was no punishment compared to the shadow that followed him everywhere. The knowledge that he could have walked away, but chose not to. In Willow Lane, the story lingered like a ghost. The perfect picture of Marcus and Evelyn Patterson, once framed in roses and Sunday smiles, had shattered forever, leaving behind a cautionary tale whispered at backyard fences and kitchen tables. And in the quiet of his cell, Marcus Patterson lived with the truth. Jealousy had written his story, and there would be no rewriting it.